Any luck that's loud enough? Good, lots of noise. Well, I'm very pleased to be here, of course, and it's my favorite thing, actually, is presenting. It wasn't always my favorite thing, but I got lined up to be an altar boy for many years, and then I graduated to being one of the people that read from the front, and I got to like it more and more for some crazy reason. I don't know. Anyway, so talking about the 3 R's, you'll see February is Psychology Month, and we decided that since these talks are in February, our whole psychology department had lots of talks about what we wanted to do, and we had talked with the Parent Involvement Committee representatives and just what are the details to do tonight. So it ended up being a kind of a gang preparation about what would be the content. And relationships, responsibility, and resiliency, it's maybe not so widely known. You think about all the information you see every day in the media about the mental health challenges in schools. And really, the mental health challenge is one of the main things that we can do with the mental health challenges is have good relationships with our kid. So we have to start off with saying, what about that relationship stuff? We know the best predictor in terms of health and success in school are good caring relationships at home and at school. So we're going to spend a little time about that. And then from that position of influence and good relationships, we can affect, in a responsible way, the lifestyle patterns of our children. So we just feel compelled to talk about that for a little while tonight. And then the last part, resiliency. So when the children have, our youth have the kinds of relationships that will, kinds of lifestyles rather, that will support the good mental health. And we have that partnership with you in the school setting as well, they're going to be much more resilient. So that's kind of the flow of the 3 R's tonight that you'll see as a background to the rest of the presentation, the first part. So just on relationships, I ran into this slide. Well, it's a research journal article about relationships. There is so much in the literature of the importance of relationships. I have spoken at conferences about this, how there are particular characteristics of relationships that teachers can have that really influence the child. Usually we would spend time with teachers saying to them, in your lives, who was a major influence on you for you to be the person you are right now? And a great part of the time, it's like an aunt or a sister or an uncle or whatever. A great part of the time it's a teacher too. This teacher listened, this teacher got me, this teacher encouraged me this way, and blah, what I did with my career and all of that responded later. So we talk about the relationships, and the same with parent, of course, too, the importance of that. The teacher is as an in loco parentis responsibility during the day, and you have the child the rest of the time as parents, a bigger responsibility. We're acting on your behalf when your kid is in school. So the parent-child relationship plays a critical role in a child's development. When children have dependable, reliable, consistent, and stable relationships with their caregivers, they have a secure base from which they can explore and experience the world, leading to healthy growth, development, and well-being. I know that's apple pie, you know that. We just need to start with a reflection on it. So mindful parenting, this article I was reading was talking about these concepts. Listening with full attention. Now that's a challenge for us all, isn't it? I've got one of these things wherever I go. Yeah, one of those things wherever I go. And it can be, you see it, people walking down the mall, pulling a toddler along and on there. It can interfere with the stop and being fully present that is very, very important to children. Children are programmed from the first 10 seconds that they're alive. They're programmed to have physical contact with the parent and the brain is already growing and developing emotionally and physically. That child is developing that relationship with the parent and being influenced emotionally from the get-go. And some people go have that, what's the surgery that they have to take the wrinkles out of your hair, face? Botox. Some people get Botox around their eyes. The kid just keeps screaming because they can't see the expressions in the parent's eyes. It's a little finding. Got to leave a few wrinkles behind when you do the Botox thing. Anyway, a child, let's go tell a quick little story about it. It's so fascinating that from the get-go stuff that the sensory motor cortex that moves your body around is programmed all in here. And of course the baby from the get-go is starting to figure out what they're seeing. You can take the baby's hand and squeeze it a few times, and you can see if you have them looking into their brain with brain scans, you can see this area all lighting up because you're touching their hand. And the child will look at the mother and hold the hand, Then you can take your hand and touch a different baby's hand and squeeze it, and that baby's sensory motor cortex lights up again because they're already learning touch, mom, dad, whatever, eyes and senses connected to the motor, and it keeps the brain, as you know, just keeps on developing from there. So our relationships with full attention, that doesn't stop, right? It's important along the way. Technology is great, but when it's actual physical to physical and we stop and listen, that's terrifically important. Non-judgmental acceptance of self and child, of course. Our job as parents is, no matter what, I love a kid, right? Got 3 kids, they're in their 30s, they know that. No matter what, sometimes our conversations are a little tense and critical, but they know the bottom line is that it's non-judgmental. You'll hear tonight the word validation, and in our culture, we've got a little gap in the validation. When a child is expressing emotion, they're really upset. Sometimes as really helpful parents, we want to jump in and say, did you try this, did you try that, why did you do that, The child in an emotional state is not ready for those words yet. They need to be validated. You're really upset, aren't you? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they'll go to a place where they can interact. So you'll hear a little Chantel will tell that a little bit better than I'm doing it later on tonight. Emotional awareness of self and child. This is the new thing we're learning, that some kids we have kids in high school sometimes, I don't know what they're feeling. There's even a condition, alexithymic, means I don't know what the heck I'm feeling. So there's a percentage of the population doesn't know a lot about what they're feeling, and I've been around long enough that in my day I was kind of taught not to feel a little bit. I played hockey. I was told I man up and all those other things. Some of that was kind of swatted out of me. So as an adult, I'm still growing and learning what my emotions are, being able to express them. And here's the new thing, regulate them. It's good to have these emotions, but if I get out of control when I'm angry and somebody gets hurt, that's not so good, is it? And I played hockey, 50-some years worth of hockey, and every time I play hockey, I meet someone that hasn't got all that regulation stuff in place. I don't think I'm one of them, but anyway. Oh, yeah, I won't tell any more of that story. Self-regulation in our relationships too, then. This is what we're teaching our kids, to self-regulate and to have that in the relationships. Think of the teacher in the class. Any time in the class, there's so much going on that when a child is doing things that's triggering the teacher's emotions, they've got to get to a place where they're the adult in the room, hopefully, and they have to watch and read what's going on, and then from a mindful kind of position, do the right things to support that child without getting caught up, and the two of them are just elevating each other. That's the skill of teaching. And then compassion for self and child is very, very important concept. I say sometimes I'm a small G Catholic. We're so taught to be guilty. I think if my kids are in their 30s now, I should have spent more time with them, I should have listened more, should have validated more, should have coached one more hockey team, whatever. Compassion for self is we just keep trying to do our best and we never get it perfect, right? That's a big part of the deal right there, is to be human, forgive yourself. Now and then you have to say to your kid, I'm sorry I said that. That's okay. That's a good thing to be doing. Anyway, those are the basics for mindful parenting, to just not get caught up in the rat race so much. Spending time with your kid is the #1 mental health influence you can have on your child. So I have to say it. It is. Our relationships. Responsibility then, and this is surprising a little bit. I became the mental health lead 7 or 8 years ago, and as Steve mentioned, I wrote a book about the kind of mental health in the classroom, what every teacher can know, kind of a book. And when I started looking into the research on what is really, really powerful for mental health for all of us, goodness gracious, it's physical activity. We often think of that as like aerobic conditioning and being able to breathe and sleep well and all of that. Physical activity, the right amounts of physical activity in a day, actually regulate the neuroreceptors and the chemistry of your brain. Some of the time people have mood disorders or anxiety disorders and they go to the doctor and they get medication. They're getting medication that the physical activity could really have helped with. That's what's known in the last 20 years of research like was never known before, the value of physical activity for your psychological or mental health. And likewise with sleep. You have to mention sleep because nowadays we know what's going on. Kids are getting about a half an hour less sleep on average than 10 years ago. I got to the point when I was testing kids, one of the questions for the parent is, how much sleep does your child get? Because I know I'm not getting valid results if the child is deprived of an hour or two of sleep every night because they've got the video games happening or whatever. What I'll be testing is not the kid's potential, it's the sleepy kid. Likewise with nutrition is so important. You know, the Canada Food Guide has just come out. It's all changed. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. We'll talk some more about it. And then finally, spirituality. So there's 20 years now of research on positive psychology. What is positive mental health and positive psychology? Psychologists used to only just do research on like clinical psychology. And then someone said one day, you know, we're pretty good at getting people back to square one or ground zero when they've had mental health conditions. We help get rid of their symptoms, but are they happy? So there's a whole psychology, a whole research on happiness now. And guess what one of the concepts in the happiness research or the positive mental health concepts, one of the strongest correlates of how the mental health and happiness of your child, the positive mental health, is spirituality. It actually, I'll show you a slide of statistics on that shortly as well. So let's go into these a little bit more now. This is the exercise physiologists of Canada have come out with this concept, this 4, and it says sweat, step, sleep, and sit. The idea was they used to have guidelines for the type of exercise you should get and how much exercise in a day. They have guidelines for little children, for youth, for adults, and for senior citizens. So it changes. It's very nice to go on the website if you do the guidelines for exercise. That'll pop up pretty quick. Anyway, what the 4 is saying there, to see how sleep gets the column that is so long. In a given day, you need to be getting more hours of sleep than time spent sitting, or time spent walking around, or time spent in moderate to intense physical exercise. Those are the 4 things needed for, and the exercise physiologists say it very clearly, with backing it up with research, those 4 things need to be in balance for good mental health. So we don't want to be in our school systems or in our homes only talking about mental health in the counseling, tell me about your feeling stuff. So sitting needs to be, and the rules are, you'll see in a minute, I'll say it again, but children, the exercise physiologists found that if they're spending more than 2 hours with recreational screen time in the evening after school, on top of all the other screen timing they're doing during the day, when students get up over 2 hours, chances are it's impeding the other 3 categories. It's getting in the way of the other 3 categories. It makes sense. And stepping just means moving around instead of sitting all the time. Some of us have jobs, so it requires a lot of sitting. We need to get up and step around. Now people are getting desks and you have a choice of standing or sitting down. Funny things on our computers, as I said. And sweating, that sweating one is getting exercise. As adults, we need like 15 minutes of the physical exercise as a basic amount that you must get. We need them in 15-minute bursts, more days than not, and you'll probably maintain yourself not too badly. Way better if you get lots of aerobic exercise, of course. But for children, it's like an hour a day of moderate to intense physical exercise they should be having. And you can guess, a lot of our students aren't doing that. They're married to the technology, and there's a lifestyle promoted. So there it is with a little more detail. Sleep, if you're in the age range of 5 to 13, it should be 9 to 11 hours. If you're in the age range of 14 to 17, it's 8 to 10 hours. And we're going to ask you a little later to spend a little time and say, how's that going in your family? And where are the opportunities? The idea is to listen tonight but have a chance to talk with each other about what are the opportunities, which one of these 4 would maybe be something that you want to work on a bit in your own home. I mentioned that the Canada Food Guide, so that's just, I put the picture up right out of the new Canada Food Guide. That's not, I don't know about you, I was raised on the farm, that's not the meat and potatoes idea of nutrition that I was taught as a kid. So there's a lot more focus now on protein foods, other sources of protein foods that maybe we didn't do as much before. Plenty of fruits and vegetables, proportionately it's half the plate there. Choosing whole grain foods, lots more water, less of the sugary drinks. Now what's really interesting about this slide, if you spend a little bit of time with the food guide, the new food guide, it's not just about the choice of food. Well, that's a minor point of what's the food you're eating. The other point is how you're preparing it. So as families preparing it. When parents teach kids to prepare the raw materials and different ways of cooking it, it's very likely those children have the skills when they go off to wherever they go off to after high school to be able to eat nutritiously. If not, they'll go and buy the stuff that's up and down the center aisles that has, you know, all the preservatives in it and fattening stuff in it. It just tastes good. It's not necessarily nutritious. So it's being involved as a family in food preparation is a big, big movement. And our Healthy Schools nurses that we have in our board are like keening up and getting ready to come and push that concept up. It's the getting to know the food and prepare it. So I said earlier I would talk about the spiritually active child and what the research is showing in terms of mental health when children are spiritually active. So children who has a positive, active relationship to spirituality are 40% less likely to use and abuse substances. That's sounding like a mental health issue to me. They're 60% less likely to be depressed as teenagers. A very beautiful book, if you want to pick it up sometime, Lisa Miller's The Spiritual Child. She wrote the book Two Parents about, you've read the book? You've seen it? I thought you gave a knowing nod there, but the concept's good. Okay. Anyway, the 60% less likely to be depressed as teenagers. We worry about our teenagers harming themselves in the teen years, and it's almost like a developmental stage to get through mood trouble in teenagers. We all know that, right? And what Lisa Miller argues when she started doing this research, what she has discovered is kids have a very natural kind of spirituality, but we've lost the discussions at the dinner table about that. And because we come from different cultures and different religions and we're mixed together, sometimes we're kind of hesitant to have that uncomfortable concept. It's not like before when there was like, one religion pounding approach, the basics, and my grandmother did it too, and all of that. So she talks about how it's easy to have those conversations about spirituality and listening to your child and what their experiences are to keep that developed, because when it slips off the plate and the child doesn't have a spiritual presence anymore, they're way more at risk for mood disorder, is what you're seeing here in those teen years. It's a lovely book. I encourage you to find it at the bookstore, read it. Anyway, 80% less likely to have dangerous or unprotected sex as well, and more likely to have positive markers for thriving and high levels of academic success. I put this in because Lisa Miller talks about they couldn't do research on spirituality until all the scientists around the world had the same definition, had to come to a consensus, and that took a long time. So it's not a spirituality that's religious sect spirituality, it is an inner sense of living relationship to a higher power. God, nature, spirit, the universe, the creator, whatever your word is for the ultimate loving, guiding life force. So a person could have a sense of being one with nature and being out in nature and feeling the spirit in the rocks and the water, and have a sense that when they spend time there, they get guidance what they need to be doing next, and have reflection time. For the scientists, that's the definition that they're using, that very wide-ranging sense of spirituality. We talk about resiliency of children. The research started with a study of what are the traits when people are resilient. The research actually started with black girls living in the ghetto, and some were resilient and some got trapped there and didn't have good lives. And the research over the years has morphed to studying what are the skills we need to teach. And the skills we need to teach are having an awareness of what you're feeling, what are your emotions, and how to regulate them. And that's where the effort of all of our teachers and psychology staff out in the system are teaching, helping children know what they're feeling and then know how to sit with that, be with that, express that, move on from that, regulate that, those kinds of skills. And to have empathy in the middle of that, of course. So awareness about these feelings and these emotions, that we say the complex psychological state we call emotions may be brought to our mental awareness through reflection from the physiological and muscular sensations in our body. And this lovely chart was developed by some Finnish psychologists. They started off, they did research with 700 subjects around the world, so in different cultures on different continents. And the subjects had a picture like the neutral one in the top right-hand corner. And they were given that bar in the bottom right-hand corner and said they would be given an emotion. So they might have the emotion would be surprise. They had to read a story about surprise, and they had to look at pictures of people being surprised, and they had to try to get in a surprise state with empathy themselves, and then say, what's going on in your body? Where do you feel that? So where you're feeling like heavy and sad and cold and lumpy, you would draw more of a blue and a green like you see at the bottom of the bar. If there's places in your body where you're kind of warming up and feeling hot and light and happy, you would color that going up into red and to yellow. What was really, really amazing about the study, they did it across all these different continents, they had to convert the coloring that people did on the internet into digitize it, to average it, and they got the same pattern across the world. So people experience in their bodies, if you look at happiness, happiness up there, the picture, happiness, of course, you have the smile muscles in your face, you feel happy, people feel happy in their heart, right? So there's a lot of yellow, the whole body's got a kind of a nice red to it. And then if we come down, let's go down to love, bottom one, second from the left. There's a whole lot of happiness kind of slipped down in the pelvis region there too. I don't know what that is. I'm going to conclude on that. Yeah, that's my best laugh I got. So